This study did meet its primary endpoint. There was a significant improvement in progression-free survival for patients who were treated with Ensartinib. The median progression-free survival was 25.8 months, and the median progression-free survival with Crizotinib was 12.7 months. The median duration of follow-up was around 20 months for patients on the Crizotinib arm and almost 24 months, 2 years, for patients on the Ensartinib arm. In the modified intention to treat population, it looked even better. The median progression-free survival for Ensartinib has not been reached, and we still need quite a few patients to have an event, and so we think that that number is going to be even better when we get the final progression-free survival data. And for Crizotinib, it stayed at around 12.7 months. We also found that the response rate for patients on Ensartinib was higher than patients on Crizotinib. With Ensartinib, it was 75%. For Crizotinib, it was 67%. And we also found that the duration of response was not reached for patients on Ensartinib. Interestingly, Crizotinib overperformed in the study. The duration of response for patients on Crizotinib was 27.3 months, which is much higher than what we've seen in other studies for patients on Crizotinib. And then when we look at the duration of response, kind of landmark analysis at both 24 and 36 months for Ensartinib, it's at 58.7% for both landmark analysis. So those patients who are responding clearly maintaining their response. For Crizotinib, you do see a drop off from 50 to just over 25%, so about half as many patients on at 3 years as at 2. There were not a lot of patients. Patients were allowed to enroll if they had untreated asymptomatic brain metastases. There were not a whole lot of patients in the study who had asymptomatic brain metastases, around 11 in the Ensartinib arm and 19 in the Crizotinib arm. But we did see that in Ensartinib, not surprisingly, we know it has good CNS activity from the phase 1 and 2 data, had that 64% response rate in the CNS compared to 21% for Crizotinib. And what we also saw in the time to treatment failure in those patients with brain mets, in patients with without brain metastases, that the time to treatment failure at 1 year, only 4% of patients on the Ensartinib arm compared to 24% of patients in the Crizotinib arm. So clearly this is a drug we've known for patients who are ALK positive that are one of the big areas in terms of failure has been in the CNS. And now we have a drug that clearly has activity in the CNS. And we've seen this with some of the other next generation drugs like Alectinib and Brigatinib. This trial did not show an improvement in overall survival, but the data is so immature. There's only been about 20% of patients who have had a survival event. And so we don't know where those numbers are going to land. And it's something that we'll continue to follow with time. And then when it came to toxicities, we saw that there were fewer grade 3-4 serious treatment-related adverse events, 8% for Ensartinib, 6% for Crizotinib. Patients did require a dose reduction. The most common treatment-related adverse events with Ensartinib were the rash, as I mentioned, which is a new toxicity. It's not like the EGFR TKI rash. It's more of a sunburn, sun sensitivity rash that we see in these patients. And there was a 9% treatment discontinuation for Ensartinib patients compared to 7% for patients on Crizotinib.
You'd said that ALK positive patients make up about 5 to 8% of all non-small cell lung cancer patients, right?
Correct. It's a small percentage. You know, it's amazing how many drugs we have in this small cohort of patients. Many of these drugs are dirty drugs. So we know some of the ALK inhibitors, Crizotinib, for example, also targets ROS1 and MET. Ensartinib is not a drug that we know of yet of does it have activity in ROS1. We don't think it's going to have activity in patients who have MET, but there's been a whole lot of interest in this field. These are often the younger, never smoking patient population. And you know, the first drug in this area got FDA approval in 2011, that was Crizotinib. And we've just seen a skyrocketing of data and research for patients who are ALK positive since that time.